Welcome to the latest episode of the Low Production High Value Show, a show for and about entrepreneurs.
On today's episode, I speak with Erik. We explore the evolution of marketing over the past 25 years, the impact of internet tools, social media, and of course, AI. We also discuss how human expertise remains crucial in leveraging these technologies effectively for successful marketing strategies. Well, Erik, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we're going to take a trip down memory lane for a little bit. Looking across your 25-year career, are there two or three moments that you would say or could say that fundamentally changed marketing from your perspective? And why do you think that was the case?
Boy,
Start with the heavy ones.
Yeah, man, like you're getting right into it. You didn't even let me get through this cup of coffee and you're like, well, hey, now let's talk philosophy and get all deep with it. I think that there are really two moments, and I think you asked for two, so we're just going to go with that. So the two moments that I think
You can even settle for one.
When I came up and it's crazy to say like, oh, well, over 25 years ago, my first year in marketing was 1999, and we had Y2K. And then there was a couple of years where things were relatively quiet. But then what happened in kind of the middle part of, I guess, what we now call the noughts, the early 2000s, that the middle part of that decade, that was the time when all of these internet tools really started getting adopted by not just enterprises, but small businesses and mid-sized businesses as well. This is when, at the point that I started my agency, which I ran for 18 years, I started that in 2006. Most of the time when I was building websites for people, it was the first time they'd ever had a website. And that was a remarkable time. And while that was happening, we were also seeing the beginnings of email marketing hitting that marketplace. We were very much in the LinkedIn and MySpace era. There were a lot of things happening, the beginning of what I would call the SEO era. A lot of stuff was going on around there, and it fundamentally changed marketing in a way that I think was not terrific. Because I think what happened was that we had, in the early years of my career, the thing that we all talked about was integrated marketing communications. And it worked. It was a fantastic strategy of, hey, we're going to have central ideas and concepts. We're going to have common messages. There's going to be a strategic way that we take this core thing and we broadcast it through all of the things that we're going to touch. And what started to happen in those middle 2000 years is that people got really enamored with the internet tools. They got enamored with the idea that we can have a website and it's like, oh no, people are going to come. It's going to be great. We're going to have this amazing thing on our website and people are going to come. And then it was, we're going to invest in search engine optimization. Our phone is going to ring off the hook and we're going to have a MySpace page. And then it was Facebook and Twitter, and that 2008 to 2010 kind of span where the social media thing started happening. And what I think that did to us is it really started to silo all of the marketing efforts, because we didn't just have at that point, especially in mid-market businesses, we didn't have any more sort of that centralized marketing brain and that centralized marketing concept that was going to govern everything. Mm-hmm. We had somebody that was focused on social media. We hired somebody for that. And we had somebody that was focused on the website. We hired somebody for that. And then we had somebody that was focused on SEO, and we hired somebody for that. And we had all of these people doing all of these things, and the centralized strategies, I think, went out the window for a very long time until people realized, again, that there are no silver bullets. So I think that was a very significant time, and I think that marketing changed a lot during that time, because we all had to learn that it's not about the tools, it's about the strategy. I think we're having another moment like that right now with AI, because we've got people opening up their ChatGPT or their Claude, and they're saying, what goes into a marketing plan? And legitimately, that's happening. And I have seen people do things, and there's this question again of, okay, we've got this new technology. It very quickly has become sort of not optional. If you're not using the AI tools, you're being left behind in one way or another. And then the question of, okay, well, now how do I apply this to marketing? You've got folks that are just saying, well, hey, my marketing manager gave me this marketing plan or this campaign, and I'm going to upload that to ChatGPT. I'm going to say, what do you think? And lo and behold, ChatGPT throws the whole thing in the garbage and gives you something completely different, because the G in GPT stands for generative. And unless you tell it otherwise, ChatGPT or Claude or any of the LLMs are going to think that their job first and foremost is to create something. And so now we create a lot of things very quickly without thinking about it, and we're not necessarily, and the question that I think is going to come to a lot of, again, in mid-sized businesses especially, is how are we actually going? So we know that we have to use these tools, just like in the same way that it was the wrong decision in, say, 2011 to say we're not going to participate in social media. That's a trend that's going to pass us by, and that's cool. Same thing, we're going to have to opt into AI in some regard. So how are we going to use it? How do we lean into the things that AI does well? And how do we avoid the things that AI does poorly? And I think that that's something that's confusing a lot of folks right now, and that's got them scratching their heads. But I think that ultimately AI is going to change the way that we create marketing.
I mean, it might sound, I don't know if the right word is counterintuitive, but with the rise of AI and based on what you're just describing, are you emphasizing to the people that you're talking to and clients you're working with about, I'll call it human-led? And what I mean by that is you're part of the equation. You are there as the strategist, the expert discerning good from bad and not fully relinquishing power and control to the AI.
It's really, really important and human-led, human in the middle, however you want to label that. It is so insanely important that we keep the people involved. So number one, and the one thing that I talk to people a lot about, is that taking somebody like me or like you've been, how long have you been doing this?
18 years. But I've been in, similar to you, started in e-commerce in 1996 and then, zoomed up to the .com, which I want to talk to you about later.
That'll be fun. But we're two guys sitting on this call, and we've got well over 50 years of experience between us, and a lot of knowledge, a lot of leadership that is not easily replaced. We know what works and doesn't work. If you take somebody like me or somebody like you and you give them AI, I kind of feel like it's like giving Barry Bonds steroids. Barry Bonds was an outstanding baseball player. I mean, one of the best before he even touched the stuff. And you gave Barry Bonds steroids, and all of a sudden, not only is he hitting 300, not only is he playing a good outfield and running the bases really well, but now he's also hitting 70 home runs. And I kind of feel that way about what happens or what can happen when people like us get a hold of the AI tools and really figure out what they're good for. By contrast, if I were to take some guy off the street and give him steroids, he is still not a Major League Baseball player. It's not the steroids that make you good. It's the steroids plus that work, talent, all those other things that go into creating that monster of a human that was Barry Bonds when he was playing baseball on steroids. I can't go and give an executive, a business leader, a business owner, I can't go and say, hey, here's Claude, and all of a sudden you're going to be a competent marketer. You still can't compete with me. You still need the human that knows what they're doing. Just like I couldn't give you a race car and you're going to be able to compete with those drivers. It's not the tools, it's the craftsperson that really defines what comes out of it.
The example I like to give is you don't fire the carpenter who you move from using a hammer to using a nail gun. You're still relying on their expertise in carpentry. And it goes back to, I think, what you've highlighted is this idea that we must still rely on the fundamentals. The fundamentals have not changed, or they're not going away, but how we address them or deal with them by incorporating AI has. And to your point, an executive a friend has a favorite saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool. And so should they play with some of these new tools? Absolutely. Should they, before they go too far, start thinking about like where and how it complements it? And one of the things I like doing is, just for fun, I went to Claude and I said, how could another agency use Claude to compete against us? And how could I use Claude to respond? Didn't know what it would give me, but it was an interesting, like I keep telling people, it's a chat bot or LLM you can converse with. So talk to it and have it talk back and push back, pose questions, ask it to ask you questions, and you'll gain more insights. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but
cite its sources and ask it why. If you think that what you're telling me is relevant, explain why it's relevant and give me a really good answer. And I found, as I'm sure a lot of people have, that there are good uses and bad uses for AI. There are areas that AI does things that I couldn't do, not on my own or with a team. AI has the capability of doing things quickly that even a group of humans would have trouble doing with large amounts of time. So it is bringing something new to the game. And to your point, I mean, give me a nail gun, I'll hurt myself. I am known for not being terribly handy.
same.
Although my girlfriend and I were joking about it, and I saw this video on Instagram of a guy who actually managed to basically cinch his junk up between two boards accidentally. And I was like, okay, I'm more handy than that guy. But you can't give me, and God forbid it's like a table saw or something, you can't give me that stuff and expect good things to happen. And the same thing is true with somebody else that doesn't know the fundamentals of what makes a good marketing strategy. It's going to tell you things that sound nice. It's going to be really complimentary. If you're ever having a bad day, just open up ChatGPT and it'll tell you that you're the greatest freaking human in the world. It is designed to make us feel nice. And that also is part of the problem a little bit because it sells it really, really well. But essentially, if you tell somebody that doesn't know a darn thing about marketing strategy to open up a large language model and put together some marketing stuff, it's basically going to be the business equivalent of the guy cinching up his junk between the two boards. And you're going to, it's going to look like you're doing the right thing when you're in there, but what comes out is not going to be happy. And that's
well, and to your point, if it falls into a glazing session, yeah, you're going to feel good, but you don't necessarily know how much substance you got from the experience. And I've gotten into the habit of, I'll use Quad as an example. I'll ask it something or I'll use it for a task, and then I will ask it to critique the output, rank it from 1 to 10, with 10 being best, and make recommendations for improving it. So I did that for a while, kind of got it tuned. Then I made that into preferences or instructions to go into the settings, so it was global across Quad. But then I started noticing some oddities, so I said, and it was programmed to do a self-assessment with every prompt or every output. And I said, you've given this as an 8.5 out of 10. Is that correct? It looks like you're skipping steps or something is afoot. And now I have to triple check the work because it admits when I call it out, yes, right, I did skip a few steps.
Or if you tell them, I had one recently where I've been playing with Claude Design also, which is actually a really, really interesting tool. And I gave it specific instructions and I said, hey, in designing this piece, I want you to use this file. Here's a PowerPoint presentation. And I'd like you to use that for design standards, colors, fonts, imagery, but I don't want you to use it for content, only for the purpose of matching the brand continuity. And lo and behold, it pulled out a bunch of content from the PowerPoint, and I said, you broke the rule. And it was like, yeah, all right, you caught me. Sorry. And
Oops.
Bad. But then you got to go. But the interesting thing is that even as an AI, it still makes humanish mistakes in the same way it makes false assumptions. It sometimes skips, you ever have, I think we've all had the client or the coworker that where you send them an email and it's got 4 things in it and they respond to the first one and the other things get ignored. And you're like, I asked you like 4 things, like, come on. It makes mistakes like that and it makes bad assumptions. Of course, when we see AI making false assumptions, we call that hallucinating. But you can't tell your client, hey, Bob, you were hallucinating that time, weren't you? But we call out AI on that. It's interesting when you work with AI a lot, the mistakes that it does, in fact, make. And if you don't have the human in the middle, where we would definitely check a human's work, the people who are taking the AI output and not really giving it a lot of thought after that, not a great idea.
It's the proverbial trust but verify.
Exactly.
And that's
And
why I was using that, critique and score yourself out of 10.
Absolutely. That's a
But
really good idea. I might steal it, by the way.
having to double down, or well, triple down. I want to jump back to 1999 for a second.
Yeah.
So you're entering the market. And like I said, I entered tech in 96. So I watched the rise of e-commerce. And like you said, if you build it, they will come. And this, e-commerce was the hype. If you don't have an online storefront, like the world will pass you by and so on. And then March of 2000 came and the world was given a reality check. And so when you entered in 99, were you already seeing signs of impending doom, or was it still, butterflies and roses?
I had a really interesting seat for this. One of my first jobs out of college was doing graphics for a very early internet security consulting company. And so I was working there, and not only during the bubble bursting, but even like during Y2K, I was there. People who remember Y2K, there were folks legitimately like the world was going to end. And I had this coworker, a really funny guy, and he was like, "Well, hey, where do you want to go looting?" And legitimately, there were people who legitimately thought that when the clocks turned, that everything was going to shut down. And when nothing happened,
would begin.
Yeah, and when nothing happened, it was like, oh, this was it. This was kind of a big nothing. But yeah, so I had an interesting seat for that because what happened was that when I joined the company, I must have been 21, no, 22. I was 22 years old, and I'm at this, and you say like, oh, I work for an internet security company. Nobody knew what the F that was. Whereas now you say, oh yeah, internet security, cybersecurity. Wow, that must be a really interesting field. I mean, I would have people look at me like, you just made that up. And so I'm working at this internet security company, and what happened is that we were very, very in demand, and then we weren't. And a lot of the things, because the growth of e-commerce was truly one of the things that was lighting the fire under the need for security, because we're storing online now all of a sudden, and never before, we are storing online in semi-public places people's personal information, their credit card numbers, in some cases, social security numbers and other, really, really sensitive stuff. And it's like, how the hell do you do that? And so there was that piece of it, which was very important. And then suddenly the company wasn't doing as well. And there was this sense that, hey, maybe this isn't what we thought it was going to be. But even though it got really big and really, really fast and then kind of disappeared pretty fast, it never went away. Nobody ever said like, yeah, this e-commerce thing is never, it's not really going to take hold.
It's just a fad.
It's just a thing. I think looking back, I think that the most interesting thing about that time were the ideas that were truly ahead of their time that were just too soon. Like, do you remember Cosmo.com?
I remember Webvan, Pets.com, because pets don't drive.
Pets don't drive. Pets.com was another one that actually, when I look at the companies that sort of should have made it, those are my top three: the Cosmo, Webvan, and Pets.com. Pets.com did most everything right, and they were too early. They were too early and too niche. Whereas now you get really successful businesses like Chewy and all sorts of other places that essentially do the same thing and do it successfully. But Cosmo.com was sort of the Instacart of the day, where they would go and just bring you stuff from the world. And they had the guys with the orange messenger bags, and you'd see them around town, and you would order stuff from the drugstore, from Blockbuster, wherever, and they would just bring you stuff. And it was just too early.
Well, we had on a smaller scale here in Toronto, it's maybe still around, sort of. It was called Grocery Gateway, and they had a fleet of vans to deliver groceries in the greater Toronto area, and it was invested in by a syndicate of investors plus a grocery chain. But, it was more about, it's kind of similar to Amazon, where you had to fund it for a considerable amount of time before, there was enough users. And then there was also two different bookstores, chapters in Indigo, and they were heavy on e-commerce, and you could get it delivered to your home. Or they had these lockers in office buildings, so you could get things delivered to these, essentially a P.O. box. And one of the biggest examples was, we had a bank here called Bank of Montreal, or BMO for short, and they started an entirely separate digital division called M-Banks. And it was basically, it ripped the bank apart. You had people that, were junior who moved over to M-Banks and rose to executive levels because they were part of the digerati. And all the hype, the buzz, and the funding that went into M-Banks. And then you had people that were, 10, 15, 20-year veterans of the bank that were being overlooked or surpassed or leapt over. And so, the hype was causing a whole bunch of cultural things and so on. And one thing I was going to mention, I started an e-commerce company in 1995 selling dress shirts and menswear on the internet.
Wow.
And to your point about credit cards, I was calling the banks I said, I want to take credit cards over the web to sell apparel. And they're like, what? I said, I want to take credit cards over the internet. There was a third-party credit card processor that the banks didn't like because they didn't.
What year was this?
This was 1995. The company was called Internet Secure, and they had created themselves as an intermediary. But the bank, one bank for Visa, wanted a $25,000 security deposit, and the other bank for MasterCard wanted an additional $25,000 as a security deposit against fraud. And I said, if I had that kind of money as a small business, I wouldn't give it to you because I could use that for something else. But I ran the business for a year. It didn't make any money. I got media attention. And then I took what I learned from that and went to work for e-commerce software companies because the hype was building, the tide was turning, there was recognition that e-commerce was going to be a thing. It just didn't become a thing for another decade.
Right, not at that level, but it's amazing. It's amazing in the scope of it when you realize that it took only 10 years for us to go from selling nothing online. I mean, and really from the point that the only people that were online were very, very early adopters. You're talking about, by and large, either students, the digerati, as you said, the folks that were really in the industry, and the people that were early on software like AOL and things like that. We went from that to anybody can have an e-commerce site in only 10 years. And in between, we actually even had some really interesting intermediary steps where with PayPal and the advent of PayPal and eBay, where all of a sudden anybody can sell anything to anyone in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that only really took us 5 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and then 10 to anybody can have an e-commerce website, which is...
Well, now with Shopify, I mean, in 24, 48 hours, I can have AI build a website, attach it to a Shopify catalog, and either hook up Stripe or Square. Shopify has the plugins.
Yep. Well, they'll even give you their own processing. You don't even need to hook anything up to it.
It's already pre-configured.
Mm-hmm.
I can set up a Facebook account to do advertising on Instagram and Facebook. It's directly integrated to Shopify, so I can close the loop. I ran this ad on Facebook, and it caused this transaction in my back end on Shopify. And I sit there and go, if you knew what I went through to build a website from scratch, talk to the banks, everything was manual, for lack of a better word. And so now, just how empowered people are. But that also speaks to, you talked about in the 99 in the 2000s, that there was this belief in integrated marketing. The belief is one thing, the execution of it was
You're
another
not wrong.
matter. But now, with the rise of AI, is an integrated approach to marketing all the more important?
It is, number one. I think that for the first time in my career, I don't want to say widespread. I think that's overstating it, but I think that there is actually an appetite for integrated marketing. And it feels different because people are actually like, wait, I can come up with one strategy and then make all the stuff and it'll be a lot easier. And I think that people are catching on to that. And genuinely people ask me like, oh, marketing must be so different. And I'm like, it's not. It's exactly the same. It's just that the tools are different. And the tools aren't what make the magic. What makes the magic is having an understanding of how you're going to meet your marketplace and how you're going to influence their behavior and how you're going to solve their problems. And then the tools just make it easier. And for the first time, I think that with AI, it's actually easier to create the integrated marketing stuff once you've got the plan. And because I can actually feed stuff into AI and say, hey, I need you to take this content and I need you to massage it into this, and it has to meet these criteria. And I need for these types of messages to end up being in there in this kind of proportion. And I can do that with AI where I couldn't do that with a human copywriter. AI does that a lot more scientifically than a human writer does. I still need the human writer, and I still need somebody like me to come up with the overall strategy. But the execution gets a lot simpler and a lot more consistent with AI. And that's one of the strengths, in my opinion.
We'll be back in a moment. And now, a word from our sponsor. Social media has become an imperative for almost every business. Discover how to successfully implement an effective social media strategy that is supported and integrated throughout every part of your organization with this essential book from our host, Andrew Jenkins, Social Media Marketing for Business, Scaling an Integrated Social Media Strategy Across Your Organization, is now available from Amazon or KoganPage.com. Now, back to the show.
Well, and do you see this as I'll call it a manifestation of, yes, there needs to be an integrated marketing strategy, but when you talked about during the 2000s, there was an SEO specialist, there was, a web designer, and now, either by circumstance or design, people are having to wear multiple hats and be kind of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to skills. Now, AI can help to some degree, but do you see this approach to integrated marketing being more reliant on multi-skilled resources? Or
I think that there's a bigger difference more than ever. And these are people that would get confused for each other even 5-10 years ago. The difference between a marketing leader and a marketing craftsperson. A craftsperson needs to have a lot of depth, but not a lot of breadth. Like every single one of these things has gotten so deep, and it used to be that you could have one person that was doing, just as an example, back in the day, you could have one person that was in charge of updating your website, doing your search engine optimization, and running your AdWords campaigns. That could be one person. And that one person could actually do all of those jobs competently. And now, if you really want somebody, if you're like, I really want somebody who knows search engine optimization, you really need somebody that is spending literally every day of their life and their workday just living in search engines and trying to figure out things like not only the Google piece of it, but also the Gen AI piece of it. If you're running online ads and you're doing that competently, that's because that's all that you're doing. So we need our craftspeople, and we need people that have that depth of knowledge, because AI doesn't know it. AI can help us put together ad copy faster and with better versioning and things like that than we could do before. However, in terms of the whole piece of what is the strategy behind this and how am I going to put this campaign together in a way that's going to work and perform and all of that, you need a human to guide that, and that human needs to be a freaking expert. But then you've got to have your leadership folks that don't have the depth but have the breadth and can understand essentially, hey, where does SEO fit in our strategy nowadays? What is its role? Because what people thought its role was, say, 10 years ago is not its role today. And so when I'm sitting down with a client and I'm saying, hey, we're going to come up with a marketing strategy, we are actually going to be making decisions about not only what we're going to do, but what we actually need that thing to do for us and what that's worth to us. Because you need somebody that can make those decisions. If you hire, Maslow's hammer, if you hire an SEO agency, the solution to every problem looks like SEO. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you hire a branding specialist, then it's going to look like branding and new messaging and new colors and all of that stuff. At the end of the day, we need leadership. And I think that that's the biggest thing that companies struggle with, is having, especially mid-market companies that don't have a CMO in-house or a VP of marketing. It's where does that leadership come from, and who's the person that's actually going to say, this is what we need to do, and now let's unleash these specialists that we have in our pocket, and let's unleash AI, and let's unleash these other resources to make it happen. You need somebody that knows a little bit about a lot of stuff to kind of put that together. So we need both things.
Well, to build on that, advising leaders of a business, and it might be a business that doesn't have a CMO or a VP of marketing, but like I'll use AEO as an example, and the growing need for earned media, the growing realization that LinkedIn and Reddit are citation sources for AEO. And so the CEO, or even if there is a CMO who's saying, we have to improve our SEO strategy, but now there's this cascading effect of, well, what are all the dominoes that fall as a result of that thinking? And suddenly, earned media, well, what am I doing for that? So I have to have some potential PR. I have to build thought leadership content and make sure it's properly distributed, and there has to be a certain cadence. And suddenly, there's a shopping list of actions to be taken, all stemming from, we need to improve our SEO strategy and AEO related. But I'm curious about the kind of conversations you're having in that regard.
Well, there's two things. So number one, of all of the places that are known as reputable creators of information in our society, who would have ever thought that LinkedIn and Reddit, and especially Reddit, would be such important places? But go into, and anyone who hasn't done this, go into Google search, which now uses Gemini really, really heavily. Go into Google search and ask it questions, informational questions about stuff that you would have asked, and gotten organic SEO responses. And you're going to get this thing. And I guarantee you that in a lot of cases, disproportionately, a lot of citations are going to come from Reddit. And that is a wild, wild thing, because 10 years ago, we were not thinking like, if I want good information, I'm going to Reddit. Like, that's not a thing that we would have thought. So number one, it's extraordinary what has become trusted media, because you're going to see that kind of a search. You're going to see more frequently Reddit on there than you would see, say, the New York Times or Wikipedia even, or other. I would say that a lot of my searches, Reddit is actually coming up as a resource more often than Wikipedia is.
Do you find you're using it more, I'll call it, for insight, kind of tapping into the pulse, versus looking for factual information? When I say factual, like articles, studies, research.
I think it tends to be both. And I'm looking at it from the perspective as I'm a user of these things that notices things that a lot of people don't, just because of who I am and my background. And I just notice that as I go through my life, that there are things that are happening and that are changing that weren't there before. The idea that you've got to create things with this end in mind, and that you need to stop thinking of so slight tangent, but back in around 2010, there was a thing that I figured out, which a lot of people did. I wasn't the only one. I'm not like that freaking unique. But when I was talking to clients about, hey, let's get your search engine optimization going, it's like, well, what do we do? And I don't want to do any of this like this illegal stuff that I keep hearing about. And some people did want to do the illegal stuff, by the way. They're like, how do I win a chess match against Google? And I'm like, you can't. If your business strategy is all I need to do is outsmart Google, you're losing.
Let's do that black hat thing.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that black hat thing. Black hats are cool. White stains, you know? But legitimately, we had a blog writing service because the idea that you were going to have recent original content on your website, increasing your footprint, giving Google more stuff to learn about you, putting that together was one of the easiest things that you could do to improve organic search traffic to your website. 100%. And now people are like, okay, well, let's put all this content on the website. And it's like, actually, we need to think more about how do we use these other platforms, because by and large, people aren't coming to our website to learn things. People are coming to our website because they realize that they need us and they want to buy things. The knowledge needs to be distributed more widely. And it's kind of a paradigm shift that a lot of people aren't used to. It's like, well, why would I put something on LinkedIn? I don't own that. It's like, well, but that's where people are actually looking for information. And more importantly, that's where the robots are looking for information. LinkedIn is considered a trusted source for all of these topics that are relevant to your business. If you're selling B2B, you definitely need to have a LinkedIn content strategy. It's important.
Well, and we're going through discussions right now saying a LinkedIn company page only reaches about 2% of its followers. But if you want, an 8 to 15x lift, get executives.
Exactly.
Sharing content. And so it's a compounding effect. But the reality is, to your point, people wanted to go black hat because they thought it was a shortcut. Well, the reality is now AI can help, but it still doesn't mean you're shortcutting or that you can. It can churn through a lot of data and give you some insight, but there's still a lot of coordinated work to be done, and it's ongoing. It's not, we're just going to do this for 3 months and then we'll be good to go. No. It's relentless.
It's why, just like anything else that you do in your business, marketing is a practice, and practice is something that you have to do every day in order to not only get good at it, but remain good at it. To go back to the Barry Bonds example, Barry Bonds had a lot of whatever you want to call, God-given talent. The guy could hit a baseball, and I bet actually if you put him in the batter's box today, he could still hit a fastball.
Better than me.
Yeah. And he can do that because of that bit of talent, but also the work, the practice over time. And even though that practice is atrophied, he's still pretty good. He's not going to be able to compete with major league players. But yeah, if you want to be good and you want to stay good, you have to practice. And it's the same in marketing as anything else. And the idea that we can set and forget our marketing strategy, that doesn't work. The world is a constantly changing place. And that means that we've got to change with it. We've got to do that quickly. So marketing is a practice, just like everything else in the business.
Well, and to build on that, in the work that you're doing with companies and clients now, you're helping them, I'll call it, sift through or ignore the hype of AI. And am I safe to say you're helping them, use your word, continue the practice of marketing, but also use to complement it with AI for actionable insight?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit more about that aspect.
Well, it's been a long-held belief of mine that if your customers have the answers to most every marketing problem that you actually have, and most marketing problems are not problems with the marketing itself, but more problems in terms of how they connect with the marketplace. I think that a lot of times, a lot of the mistakes that business owners make have to do with the fact that they don't really understand what their customers want from them. They don't understand how their customers talk about their product or service. They don't understand what really is getting somebody off of their seat to make a decision. Something I tell people all the time is that what your customer buys and what you sell are different. We need to start selling them that thing, because that thing is, if we can sell them the thing that they actually want to buy, imagine how much easier it would be for us to do that. So for years and years and years, I have been a big proponent of doing just qualitative market research. People are like, oh, just have a survey. I'm like, yeah, surveys are great when the answer I'm looking for is a number. But when what I really need is insight, I need to talk to people. And so let's do that, and let's make that part of our thing. The issue with doing qualitative interview-based market research is that it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's very resource heavy. The people that are really good at it are going to charge, if you hire a freelancer to do this kind of thing, like I did when I had an agency, we were always paying over $100 an hour for somebody to conduct this type of research. So one of the things that I've been doing is I've actually been using AI to conduct research. I set it up where I have somebody says, yes, I'm willing to, a customer of one of my customers says, I'm willing to participate in this research and tell you why we went with company X. We'll sign them up and we'll have a robot call them on the phone, ask them some questions, get some information, and we can actually then take that. And one of the things that AI is good at that humans aren't, because we've got our own biases about what things mean and stuff like that, but I can give a pile of interview transcripts to an AI and say, hey, break this out. I want you to score it using this algorithm. I want you to find me the common themes. I want you to tell me where people's buying behavior actually is. And AI is good at that level of analysis that people aren't. And so what I've discovered, and kind of accidentally, is that I can create higher quality market research by combining the things that I know about how to conduct this type of research with a better analytical tool than a person's brain can provide. And
Well,
yeah.
are you taking I'll call it the client's brief? Are you helping the client design the objective of the research? And also, just sort of part two to that is, are you devising a hypothesis and then testing it and looking for either confirming or refuting assumptions through the research?
So that second part is where I really like to use surveys, because I think that surveys are really great for testing a hypothesis and confirming, or, if I want to say, if I can get a question about what do you think about this in front of 200 people, I'm probably going to get a really good answer back. And I'm going to be able to say, yeah, 63% of the people that we surveyed agree with this. And we think that that's going to be reflective of the general population at large right now. So I think that surveys are really, really good for validating what we think. But from the purpose of getting insight and kind of understanding, well, what are the things that we're missing? Where are our blind spots? What do you as the customer really value in this transaction? That's much better gotten through an interview than it is through a survey. What I'll sit down with a client when we're talking about, hey, what do we want to do here? Where should we take the messaging? What are the things that are really important for us to hit? And we'll spend a lot of time talking about what's the question that we really need to answer? And let's build an interview project around that. And let's really get deep with people about these particular things. And a lot of it is one of the most popular ones that I've been dealing with. And one of the things that I find really, really interesting is that I work with a lot of companies, and especially if you're in, almost universally in any B2B professional services company that I've worked with, it's almost universal that people say that I win or lose deals based on price. And almost universally, I find out that that's not actually the case. And that price is usually scapegoated as being, well, you know what, if we were the cheapest one on the market, then they would have hired us. And it turns out that that's not true. And it turns out that a lot of the time, now there are people, obviously, that make decisions solely based on price. But what I found almost universally in doing this type of research is that most buyers are a lot more price elastic than companies realize. And what they're actually looking for is value, which is different. And a lot of people don't understand that either. But value is different than price, and they're looking for value, they're looking for safety. And at the end of the day, a B2B buyer of any kind of professional service, whether that's consulting, IT, outsourced accounting, whatever it is, a lot of times that buyer is going to go with the company that is within a certain price range, but that makes them feel the most safe. Because at the end of the day, what that buyer wants is the same. We used to say nobody got fired for hiring IBM. And it's like, oh, well, isn't that a cute saying? But it's true. When if I am in charge of hiring the IT company or hiring the marketing agency or hiring the outsourced accounting firm, whatever it is, I'm obviously going to try to make my superiors happy with what I'm spending. But I also very much need to make sure that this decision is not going to get me fired. And frankly, hopefully, it'll get me a promotion if I make the right decision. I might get my bonus this year because I made a good decision. These are all things that are entering into people's minds, and the thing that they need and the thing that you're selling is very often different because that person generally doesn't care about the ins and outs of the IT service. They want a company that's going to make them feel safe. They're going to want a company that's going to be responsive. And if it's not the cheapest, it turns out that that's okay most of the time. It's really fascinating when you actually dig into these things.
Well, when you talked about what they sell versus what customers buy are usually two different things. In your research, when you illuminate the fact that what their clients are buying, it's not misaligned, but their assumptions are being refuted, or you confirm your assumption or assumptions are incorrect. How hard is that pill to swallow?
It depends. I had a client back in the day, and this is going back probably almost 10 years. I had a client that essentially said that we're going to, and I'm not going to go too deep, I don't want to out who this company was, but we had a client that said, we're going to guarantee that we save you at least 10% on this type of expense in the first year, or we're going to work for free until we do. And that's our guarantee, and that's what our market needs right now. And we did the research, and when we kind of dug into that guarantee and said, how much did this impact your decision? Did you hire the company because they were going to save you 10%? And universally, it was a goose egg. There were exactly 0 people that we interviewed that had anything to say about the guarantee. It came up exactly 0 times unprompted. And when we did dig in and ask about it, it was like, yeah, it's fine. What we discovered is that what was a lot more valuable than saving the 10% in cash, and not that people didn't want to save money, but the pain was in the paperwork being pushed around and the human hours that were being spent, and saving headaches for their people and having improved accuracy, and all of they were a lot more scared of losing the time in BS and double work than they were about the 10%.
Yeah,
And
alleviating my pain is a lot more valuable to me than the 10% savings. Well, I still have the pain.
10% is, but that's not what's keeping me up at night when we have to deal with this part of the business. This is what's keeping me up at night, and told the client, we said, hey, we think that you need to demote this guarantee and really focus on X, Y, and Z. And they ended up firing us. So sometimes they don't take it well, but I honestly never had it where we do this kind of research and we have a company. It's almost universal that people learn something about their business that they didn't know, which is always really, really helpful. We can only do better by trying to meet the customer where they are. And now it turns out that with AI tools, that's an easy thing, a relatively easy thing for me to do at scale and consistently without a lot of expense.
The proverbial leaders to water. As we come to a close, there's just 2 last questions I want to ask you, building on what we were just talking about, AI related. Looking ahead 5 years, what do you think entrepreneurs will believe about AI and marketing that turns out to be completely wrong?
I think that the thing that they're going to believe is wrong is that AI is a replacement for creativity. I think that people are going to realize that AI is a channel for creativity but that it is not creative. And that's something that I 100% believe. I think that AI is a great imitator, but I don't think it's a great creator, not at this point. And so if nothing fundamental changes, I think that that's going to be a really big light bulb moment when people realize that.
I see it as just another paintbrush, but we still have to be the artist. Should we allow it to replace creativity? No. Should we use it to enhance? Absolutely. Well, and so that was talking about 5 years. Let's talk about 20 years from now. When people look back on this AI era 20 years from now, what do you hope they never forget about what makes marketing actually work?
I hope that we don't lose focus on the customer. I think that the idea that our ideas only work if not only if they have to survive the marketplace, but more than that, if we're going to be successful, they have to thrive in the marketplace. So I think that truly understanding the customer is never going to go out of vogue. The really fascinating thing, though, I think, is that where we have people growing up now that have no concept of what life could have been like before the smartphone. And it was 2006, 2007 that the first like really good consumer viable Blackberries kind of came out. Like I feel like that was 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And then the iPhone was 2008, somewhere around there.
07, the Jesus
7.
phone. But the BlackBerry, was the precursor. And I worked for a telecom company, and you had your BlackBerry on your holster, and the Crackberry.
Nobody can. Yeah, the holster. Nobody remembers. There are people that legitimately have zero memory of what it was like to not walk around with a computer in your pocket. And I think that there's going to be an element of that with AI as well. When we look back at this time and say, oh my God, I can't imagine what it was like before this.
Think about cordless phones even.
Think about cordless phones. Think about when, do you remember not using a web browser? These things are so universal.
This is not a flex, but just a timeline. I have 3 degrees. The first degree I got through with a typewriter. Second degree, word processor. Third degree, laptop.
There you go.
I think that's a great explanation of the technical evolution that I've lived through, and so many have.
And if you went to school now, there are a lot of students. I teach part-time. There are people that are coming in with the AI recording devices for note-taking. It's 100%. People are not going to remember what it was like before this happened.
So true. It'll be interesting to see how things evolve. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For everything you shared. It was much appreciated. And where can people find you?
Well, hey, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over the LinkedIns. You can find me on Spotify I've got a podcast. I read my marketing poetry, and you can find me there. And I've got a haiku most every week to read to the internet. And the Instagram, those are probably the best places to find me.
And to learn more about your work, the same places? Start with LinkedIn?
Same places,
okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Low Production High Value Show. Be sure to give us a rating and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out Volterra at volterradigital.com to learn more about how they can support your social media marketing.